Welcome to a forward fold tutorial. So often in classes, forward folds are taught. They're a big part of the yoga practice. But if there's limited hamstring mobility, hip mobility, boobs, belly, anything in the way, sometimes forward folds can really restrict our breathing and can feel fairly inaccessible and uncomfortable. So I'm going to show you some different tips, tricks, ways to use props, and ways to arrange your feet to make forward folds feel a little bit more easy in your body and allow the breath to continue throughout your practice. I think it's helpful when watching tutorials to watch the tutorial once through first so you can see it in my body and then follow along a second time through. This is going to be a fairly short tutorial and it'll be really helpful for some of my classes that you'll be taking a little bit later on. All right, so first things first, we often come to the top of our mat in a forward fold. And when we walk forward, the typical cue is feet, inner hips width distance apart, and then folding over your legs. For me, when I do this and I fold over my legs, my boobs and my belly get in the way, and this is about as far as I can go before my spine starts to round. In forward folds, what we're looking for is still lengthening through the spine and engagement of the low belly so that the forward fold doesn't round the spine totally over, but instead allows for space to hinge at the hips to fold over. So when we're thinking about forward folds, my first recommendation is to widen the stance of your feet. So here, if I fold over, I can get to about here before I'm fairly uncomfortable. If I widen the stance of my feet, that creates all this extra space for my chest and my stomach to fall into to create a little bit more extension through my spine. So if we're thinking about ragdoll pose as a forward fold and you're folded over here, I can get about this far and then my spine rolls over. But if I widen the stance of my feet, I can fold quite a bit more deeply into this posture. That's true for any other forward fold as well. Sometimes we're cued big toes to touch, a little bit of space between your heels. Because I have wider hips and a little bit of thick thighs, I notice that my knees start to bow out. This can be true too for limited hip mobility or tight hamstrings. So know that you can widen the stance of your feet to inner hips width distance apart. And when we think about inner hips width distance apart, a good way to measure it is to bring both of your fists together like this, and then bring them in between the inner arches of your feet, and that's about inner hips width distance for your body. So when we think of forward folds, we want to fold over slowly. Really often we tend to just kind of roll over and our spine rolls over. What we're looking for is engagement through your core, and think of sticking your butt back as you fold forward. So you're folding, slowly. Low belly pulls in, shoulder blades are still together. And then if your belly starts to hit right here and your spine isn't rounded quite yet, then you can widen the stance of your feet to allow more space to fold over your legs. That's true for seated forward folds as well. So Paschimottanasana, a seated forward fold that's taught fairly often, is legs straight out in front of you. We're often told to shift our sits bones up and back. And then from there, we reach up and think of stabilizing through your core first. So a lot of times in forward folds, I'll see something like this, so a really rounded back, and that puts strain on the low back, which already in our day-to-day has a lot of pressure. So what we're looking for is a tall spine, engaged core, arms reach up. Sometimes I bring my hands to my shoulders, and then from here, little micro bend in your knees, you can fold over your legs. Check it out. Right here is where my belly hits and where I don't have any more space. So my solution for that is widening the stance of my feet, like so. That creates all this space for this part of my body to fall into. So you can fold here, think tall and long spine, folding over your legs to your degree. So what I think of is folding forward until for me, it's right about here when I start to move into this shape. And kind of move like it's like a turtle shell. That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is a long spine. So even if you come out of the posture, out of the forward fold a bit, know that it's going to be way better for your back over time. So options here for a wide-legged forward fold instead of Paschimottanasana, a seated forward fold. Another option too for forward folds, especially if it's boobs and belly that are in the way, and belly in particular, is to bring your hands to your low belly. For me, this was really hard to get used to doing, mostly because this was the part of my body that I felt the most insecurity about for many years. This was the part of my body that I was always like, you know, thinking terrible, mean things about and judging and all this stuff. So to get used to touching my belly was actually kind of a lot for me. So know that the more that you do it in your yoga practice, the more that you begin to love these parts of your body and realize that the shape of your body doesn't determine your worthiness or anything else about your character. So that was a random aside, but what we're looking for is if you can press the belly in, it creates a bunch more space for you to fold over your legs. So often the belly kind of pops out right here. So this is as far as I can go without using any assistance. Another option here is pressing the belly in and allowing for quite a bit more space for a flat back. When I'm not pressing my belly in, I get to here. When I do press my belly in, so you can see right here, what's happening is I'm literally just creating like an extra fold in my stomach so that it's out of the way so that I can fold over my legs. All right, so that's another option. Another great way to do forward folds is to use blocks. If you have blocks, touching the ground is not a requirement in any posture in yoga. So know that if you have blocks and you're in a forward fold here, you can reach for your blocks. Or if you're in a standing forward fold, you can also set your blocks in front of your hands at any height. And this is another example of when my feet are inner hips width distance apart. If I'm planning to fold over my legs, I can press into my belly to fold over, and hands can rest on blocks, on the earth, on your feet. So the things that we think about in forward folds in terms of accessing them a little bit more easily is to widen the stance of your feet. If at any point you feel like your breath is restricted or that there's discomfort in your back, you can practice widening the stance of your feet, creating more space. That's almost always the answer. If hamstrings are the thing that feel uncomfortable to you in forward folds, you can always have a micro bend in your knees. Legs don't need to be completely straight to fold over. In fact, we often lock out our knees here. So a bend in the knees is great for a forward fold. So bend your knees, use blocks, widen the stance of your feet, create space for whatever is in your way, and if need be, then shift this gift out of the way to allow a little bit more space, pressing into your belly. Forward folds for me were part of the practice for quite some time that I was fairly uncomfortable in. And when I learned to widen the stance of my feet and learn to manipulate my body a little bit more, I was so much more comfortable and could maintain steady breath. So I hope that this was helpful in your practice of forward folds. And if you have any questions, you can always message me on Instagram, slide into my DMs, that's always an option. Send me an email, whatever it is that you want to do. I have plenty other options if these aren't working for you right off the bat. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy your practice.